When Soviet investigators finally located the bodies at Dyatlov Pass in 1959, they thought they knew exactly what they were looking at. 9 hikers, caught in a freak blizzard, dead from extreme frostbite. It was a tragedy, but a predictable one in the unforgiving Ural Mountains. Except that's not what they found at all. Instead, they found a tent sliced open from the inside. They found footprints belonging to people running for their lives into a negative 30-degree blizzard. And then they found Lyudmila Dubanina. She was discovered face down in a frozen creek. Her body bore no external bruises, no scratches, no signs of an attack. Yet, an autopsy revealed her ribs were completely shattered with the blunt force equivalent of a high-speed car crash, and her tongue had been cleanly removed. For over 60 years, the official scientific explanation has blamed a rare, naturally occurring avalanche. But an avalanche doesn't crush a human from the inside out without bruising the skin. An avalanche doesn't leave clothing soaked in military-grade radiation. And an avalanche certainly doesn't cause the Soviet government to classify the autopsy files for 30 years. To understand what happened on the night of February 2nd, 1959, we have to look past the local folklore, ignore the internet rumors, and look directly at the physical evidence. This wasn't a group of amateurs. These were 9 highly experienced Grade 3 mountaineers led by a 23-year-old engineering student named Igor Dyatlov. They knew the cold. They knew the mountains. Originally, there were 10. But a few days into the trek, one hiker, Yuri Yudin, suffered chronic joint pain and had to turn back. He would be the only survivor of the expedition. By February 1st, the remaining 9 reached the slopes of Kolatsyakol. In the indigenous Mansi language, the name literally translates to Dead Mountain. Facing worsening weather, they pitched their large tent on an exposed slope. This was a deliberate, calculated move by Dyatlov. Instead of retreating down into the safety of the tree line where they could build a fire, he wanted to maintain their altitude. They ate dinner, cracked a few jokes in their group diary, and went to sleep. When the group failed to send a telegram weeks later, the rescue parties were dispatched, and on February 26th, they found the camp. The scene made absolutely no sense. The tent was half torn down and covered in snow. Inside, investigators found everything: their warm coats, their boots, their survival supplies, their cameras. Everything was left behind in a desperate rush, but the most chilling detail was the canvas of the tent itself. It hadn't been torn by the wind or ripped by a bear. Forensics proved it had been slashed open with a knife from the inside. Tracking the footprints down the slope towards the tree line, investigators found a detail that broke their understanding of human psychology entirely. If you are fleeing an avalanche, you sprint. But these footprints, they were calm. Evenly spaced, they were walking. One wearing only a single boot. 9 sets of tracks marching down into the freezing dark. A mile away, at the edge of the woods beneath a massive, ancient cedar tree, the search party found the first twisted piece of the puzzle. They found 2 hikers, Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko. They were dressed only in their underwear. Their hands were utterly destroyed, raw, scraped, and bloody. Looking closer at the cedar tree, the search party realized why. Skin and muscle tissue from the 2 men were found permanently embedded in the wood. Forensic experts agree they were climbing to look back up the hill toward the tent, as if they needed to keep an eye on whatever had driven them into the cold. 3 more bodies, including the leader, Igor Dyatlov, were found positioned between the tree and the tent. They were frozen in crawling poses, pointing back up the slope. It seemed that after the initial panic, they had tried to return to the camp. They died of hypothermia before they could make it. For a moment, authorities thought they had the whole tragic picture. A sudden panic, a rush into the cold, and a slow freezing death. but it was the second group of bodies, found over 2 months later under 4 meters of snow in a ravine, that completely destroyed the hypothermia explanation. In May, the spring thaw finally revealed the last 4 members of the expedition. And this is where we step completely outside the realm of natural disaster. Dr. Boris Vozrojdeny, the lead forensic pathologist, was shocked by the autopsies. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol's skull was heavily fractured. Semyon Zolotaryov and Lyudmila Dubinina had their rib cages crushed completely flat. Dr. Vozrojdeny noted something physically impossible in his logs. The injuries were exclusively internal. Despite the devastating life-ending trauma to their bones and organs, there was not a single scratch, abrasion, or bruise on the outside of their skin. In May of 1959, the Soviet regional prosecutor Lev Ivanov officially closed the case. The verdict was bafflingly vague. The hikers had died due to, quote, "an compelling natural force which they were unable to overcome." Case closed. The files were sealed. But hidden deep inside those archives was a document that absolutely should not have existed for an avalanche investigation. It was an order for radiological testing on the hikers' clothing. The results were staggering. The brown sweater of one hiker and the trousers of another were emitting incredibly high levels of beta radiation. Decades later, in the 1990s, lead investigator Lev Ivanov finally broke his silence shortly before his death. He admitted that the Soviet military had ordered him to completely censor the radiation findings. Ivanov confessed that senior regional officials were panicked. They demanded he bury the file, seal the bodies in lead-lined zinc coffins, and ban the victims' families from asking questions. Furthermore, he was ordered to silence the witnesses. Because during February and March of 1959, multiple independent witnesses, including meteorology staff and the military itself, reported seeing massive, glowing orange spheres silently gliding across the night sky directly over the Dyatlov Pass. Were the hikers the unintended casualties of a secret Soviet weapons test? Was it an experimental atmospheric fuel air explosive? A bomb that creates a massive overpressure wave. It explains the radiation. It explains the glowing orbs in the sky. It explains the government's sudden terror. And it explains why the Soviet military completely sealed off the entire hiking region for 3 full years after the incident. But the story doesn't end there. In 2021, the mystery was suddenly declared officially solved by mainstream science. 2 Swiss researchers published a massive, highly publicized paper in the journal Nature. They used advanced computer modeling, even utilizing code meant for Disney's Frozen, to prove that a rare phenomenon known as a delayed slab avalanche was responsible. The theory sounds perfect. The hikers dug into the snow slope to pitch their tent, inadvertently destabilizing the powder. Hours later, a heavy, compact block of solid snow slid down like a concrete slab, slamming into the tent, fracturing skulls and breaking ribs while they slept in the dark. It is a brilliant, clean, highly mathematical explanation. Except, it completely ignores human behavior. But the forensic logs show those footprints leading away from the tent were not frantic. They were organized. More importantly, while evacuating a supposedly buried tent, they managed to leave their shoes, their coats, but they somehow took the time to meticulously place a flashlight on top of the tent roof, switched on before walking away. Look at the timeline of the injuries. Was this just a tragic, cascading series of natural mistakes? Or did 9 experienced mountain experts slice open their own shelter and walk out into a negative 30-degree freezing hell? If this case gave you chills, hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the unknown. See you in the next archive.